Hello and welcome to a very special comics burst from the Full Force podcast, sponsored by Distant Planet Comics and Collectibles, where we take an in-depth look at the newest G.I. Joe comics and related titles of the week, with me as your host, Chris Advanced Copy McLeod, aka Diagnostic 80. Joining me on this preview review episode is Brian Spoiler-Free Hickey. On this instalment of your absolutely favourite kind of burst, we have managed to get our hands on an advance copy of the as-yet released new IDW Publishing ongoing G.I. Joe comic from Paula Law, Chris Evenhouse and Brittany Peer. So without further ado, let's get stuck into this comics burst. G.I. Joe Issue 1. Tyranny is on the rise as Cobra topples governments and spreads its ruthless power across the globe. In these trying times, desperate measures are taken. The new G.I. Joe program recruits civilian spies and saboteurs, ordinary people living in occupied territories who will put their lives on the line to strike back through clandestine but high-impact missions. Join these new recruits as they resist Cobra control, fight to make a better world for all, and find out just what they are capable of. So this is amazing. First off, big thank you to IDW, to Paula Law, for putting us on the list for getting an advance copy of this. So really appreciate that, guys. Thank you so much. And I should also shout out Ingrid, who I've been talking to on email as well. Thank you so much for all the help and everything with this particular situation. So Brian, I've obviously we've both read the issue now, and we're going to do like a basically kind of like a spoiler-free overview. I say spoiler-free because there are a couple of moments in this comic that I don't really want to spoil for people.
Yeah, I mean, wow is all I have to say.
Yeah.
I didn't know what to expect. I really had no idea what to expect when I first saw this kind of being posted on social media, and the Full Force were, retweeting and reposting Paula Law's tweets. And I liked the visual style. That was my first kind of real sense of what was coming down the line.
Yeah.
I liked the characters, but I really didn't know what to think of it. I remember there was a lot of hype when Fred Van Lente took over the writing for G.I. Joe several years back, and a lot of high hopes there, and he came into some new radical things, but overall it lost a lot of momentum for me.
Yeah.
And I suppose I had fears that this was going to go the same way, but boy, was I wrong. Totally wrong. And this has my mind blown. That's all I can say.
Well, let's discuss. First of all, we can start with the covers, because obviously they're all kind of out there and people know what they are. So we can go through those initially, just to start us off. And we've obviously got the main cover by Chris Evenhouse. Well, I hope I'm getting that surname correct. I'm pretty sure I'm butchering it, so sorry, Chris. Again, it's been great following you on Twitter recently and seeing the posts you're making as well, especially with some of the design choice kind of things that he's been throwing out there. So, well on point. The art is gorgeous. And again, this cover, no different. This is the one that started it all. This is the one that they kind of led with when they released the press release, IDW. The kind of funny Cobra-esque kind of in-character press release. I hope Cobra don't come down on me for that. But yeah, it's just a really cool, beautiful use of colour here, isn't there?
The artwork is just magnificent. Looking at this kind of the lead cover, or the cover variant one, we should say, the subtle it's the minimal use of colour is what makes this powerful. So you've got these kind of blues, purples, and reds. It's like a 3-4 colour palette, and obviously Tiger really pops off. The Cobra logo and the Cobra flags pop off.
Yeah.
And I love that flat, one-dimensional style that he treats the background imagery in, even like the flare of the street lamps.
Yeah.
It's just beautiful how it's done. And of course, but lots of detail in there as well in the pencils and the inks. And then you've got your kind of monochrome Duke and Scarlet on this kind of wanted poster. It's just a magnificent piece of graphic art.
It kind of tells you all you need to know about the situation. It shows you that Cobra have taken control of major cities in the minimum. We're also led to believe it's a global thing. But, they've obviously taken control of that. You've got this wanted poster which shows you that G.I. Joe are a thing, Duke and Scarlet specifically. And it's just very, again, like the mood, the tone, it's raining. There's all sorts of really interesting things about this. And then you've got Tiger, who's kind of drawn to this poster almost like, so, it insinuates that that's the route he's going to be taking. And yeah, again, beautiful artwork, beautiful colours, and that's the first cover. The next one, I love this retailer incentive by Dustin Weaver. And one of the reasons I like it so much is because he's gone and used the Avalanche as one of the vehicles in the background, as if that... I just think that's a really kind of deep cut for G.I. Joe fans. You've got obviously Sky Striker, the Vamp, the X-30 Conquest, the Skyhawk, and the APC in the background, or the ATC for us, Brian. That obviously behind them, you've got quite an interesting kind of grouping. You've obviously got Scarlet, Duke, and Tiger, but then you've also got this scar-faced Major Blood in the background with the Cobra flag flying high. But why the Avalanche really sticks out to me is like, of all the vehicles you could choose, they've gone with that. But I love the fact that that Dustin has gone with that.
Well, there's a couple of things here. First off, it's just a kick vehicle, so why not put it in there? And it's one of these, you don't see it that often, so it's maybe a little break from tradition. It's not the typical vehicles that you see out there. But I don't want to say too much about the story here. But when find yourself in a situation where you're on the underdog side of a conflict, you're going to use whatever you can lay your hands on.
That's a very good point.
And who cares if it's rare or if it's ugly or you will just use whatever you can get when you're the underdog to fight back against the big guys.
Hey, if it's got tank treads and guns on it, you're going to use it, aren't you? So yeah. No, I just love it. I love the fact it's been used. I think it's a brilliant kind of, it highlights it like I said, like a vehicle that has had very little kind of shine in recent years. It did obviously get some shine in the Deke cartoon and it's been kind of utilized very sporadically in very small doses, but I'm glad to see it on this one. And then we have the Retailer Incentive B by Eleonora Carlini. I had to practice that just before I said it, didn't I, Brian? But again, this is another very powerful cover, isn't it?
I mean, this is just beautiful. Again, we have this almost film noir feel to the cover. So you've got I don't know if it's like the moon or a big spotlight, but it's a nighttime setting. Our kind of hero characters are obviously faithful to the style that they appear in the comic, but with this kind of menacing Cobra Viper, looming over them, and the city building lights all kind of lit up. It's just it's a great shot. And one thing I want to say, the character designs,
they're cool, aren't they?
Brilliant. I mean, it really feels like something from a cartoon. An anime cartoon, or maybe a classic 80s cartoon. There's a beautiful style to the characters, how they're designed and illustrated. This is one of my favorite covers here.
It's really nice. I love as well, there's like an effect running across the main characters at the front of the bottom front of the cover. It's almost like the lighting reflections and stuff like that have just been like scattered across. It just looks really cool. Almost looks like traffic moving at night. It's amazing. And again, it gives that kind of it gives like an idea of movement of, like a mystery. I really like it. I think it's amazing. And then finally we have the Frankie's Comics exclusive cover, Clayton Crane. And this one's really cool as well. This is more of your kind of classic designed characters: Cobra, Destro, Baroness, Storm Shadow, and then you've got Hiss Tank and a Rattler in there, looming behind them in this huge Cobra logo. A really striking cover.
What I love is the illustration on the tank and the Rattler. They're just beautifully illustrated. They're so detailed. The finish on them, the colouring on these is excellent. And then you've got this very dynamic explosion, as if the Rattler's just dropped its bombs in the wake of the Hiss Tank and just obliterated
an avalanche.
United States, an avalanche, or United States Defense Forces, or whatever.
Yeah,
it's just another classic cover here.
Yeah, so I think overall in terms of covers, we've got some absolute beauties for number one. But let's kind of get into the overview of this story. Yeah, so we're obviously, with this particular review, we can only talk about so much because obviously this is way before it comes out on September the 18th. So we have been asked to keep it as vague as possible, and that's totally understandable. But what I can personally say is this is a really, really, really solid comic. Something that I wasn't fully expecting. What about yourself, Brian? Initial thoughts?
I've got to say I was blown away.
Yeah.
This was very different from what I was expecting. I imagined that it would somehow kind of pick up from the alternative G.I. Joe continuity that had been run by, Fred Van Lente or picked up by Aubrey Citizen, but didn't go anywhere near that.
Yeah.
This is a brand new continuity, a brand new vision for G.I. Joe, and it really surpassed my expectations by a huge amount. I was left wanting a lot more and absolutely blown away by what I read in this comic.
There are a couple of very interesting reveals in this one, a couple of like shocking moments, you could say, but still, I think it works really well with the actual issue. And let's talk about like a kind of the broad strokes of the story. I mean, basically, it's the story of Idw G.I, who is a young man in Cobra-occupied Chicago, which insinuates that Cobra haven't taken over 100% yet, but they do have Chicago at least. And it basically follows this young guy. And obviously the preview pages that are out there already have shown everybody that we see Duke, we see Vipers, we see Major Blood in like the opening few pages. And it's really about this guy, Idw G.I, who gets the nickname Tiger from the Joes, in actual fact, at some stage later in the comic. It's really his story about coming to terms with his decision on what to do with his life, really. And like I said, we've got Cobra occupying Chicago. We have the Joes as this clandestine underground government against Cobra kind of team, haven't we? We've got they're this kind of almost like rebel alliance.
Yeah, I mean, there's this kind of subtle echoes of the Renegades cartoon series in there, but still very different in terms of our characters and the overall kind of setup for the scenario. Rivy is this, I suppose you would describe him as one of many people who has kind of suffered or lost through this kind of ongoing conflict. We don't get much backstory on the conflict. Presumably that will be revealed in time.
Yeah.
But we do know that people are, certainly in Cobra occupied Chicago, people are afraid, people are not happy with the new regime, and he sees an opportunity to get involved and make a difference, albeit without any skill or any experience in kind of combat or soldiering.
Yeah, and I mean there's a really kind of interesting couple of pages in the comic that explain how he gets in with the Joes, and there's something really, I don't know, there's just something really well done about that. I really enjoyed how he ends up kind of meeting the team, and then obviously we have seen, I think Twitter has posted, or IDW has posted on Twitter, a panel of Scarlet and Stalker in kind of almost in an interrogation setting where they've got him on a chair kind of tied up and they're explaining to him what G.I. Joe is. And obviously that comes a lot later in the issue. Again, we can't go into loads of details about this, but it's just really well done. The writing's superb. The artwork is fantastic. As we've mentioned about the covers already, the artwork going into this particular issue is just superb, isn't it? I mean,
the entire creative team on this, you couldn't put a better team together. Paul Allore's script, it's very difficult to not say too much, but I was so impressed with where he's gone with this, and I'm really holding back here, trying not to spoil. Yeah, you have to read it. You have to read it and just get your head around this intro to what's going to be an amazing run in the IDW universe and the G.I. Joe universe. On the visual side of it, you've got the combination of the pencils, the inks, and the colours, and it's just the graphic style, and it's a very graphic, almost two-dimensional, very flat kind of style, which I personally love. So we've got these beautiful character designs from Chris Evenhouse. The inks are lovely solid black lines, and then the colours from Brittany Peer. That colour palette throughout is minimal use of colours and getting these very kind of contrasting but striking tones throughout the panels. The whole thing is a visual feast for the eyes. It's absolutely beautiful.
It really is, yeah. And there's very few things I can really compare it to as well. That there's a very like original look to it, especially for a G.I. Joe comic. And something that we should talk about is that brilliant kind of way that Paul has re-engineered some of the characterization in the book. That's something that really struck me. Again, we can't go into massive details, but some of the ways in which, because obviously one of the things about G.I. Joe is that they're not all soldiers. Some of them are just people that they've plucked out of regular life as volunteers because, you know, they don't want to live in this world. They don't want to live in this Cobra-occupied world for obvious reasons. So some of those characters do have odd backgrounds, like, well, not odd backgrounds, but, you know, non-military backgrounds, like they're substitute teachers or, you know, probably chefs or something along those lines. They're not equipped fully to deal with this, and that comes through a couple of times in conflict. And and that's something, again, that is really well handled. I think it's really well done, not just by the writer, by Paul, but also by the artwork and the way the story is told through the panels.
Well, you know, that's actually, you know, a really good point there. And I think one of the strengths of this is the setup is that there's a resistance movement, or at least part of the setup is that there's a resistance movement against Cobra in this Chicago occupied Chicago area. And when you have a resistance is usually made up of civilians. And if you look back at any historical conflict, that's where your rebels come from, civilians who are just really not happy with the new regime and are ready to take up arms against their oppressors. And that's kind of, you know, what's feeding into this new vision of G.I. Joe.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that pretty much kind of explains the overall overview of the issue. So Brian, I mean, what would you? We're gonna do potatings anyway, because even though we're gonna be doing them when we do this almost identical episode, but much more detail on September the 18th. Let's kind of give it a potating. What would you say? You know, this particular issue. What would you give it for this one?
Just basing on only this issue, it's a magnificent comic. I'm recommending that Joe fans go out and buy this. Just park your perceptions at the door. You're not going to get 1980s Real American Hero here. It's not going to be that. It's not going to be Sunbow cartoon. It's not going to be that. And nor will it be the HBO Renegade series. It's not going to be that either. Park your expectations at the door. Pick this up. It's a great script. The visual style, the art, the colours, it's just amazing. I have to go all out with this. I'm going with 5 potatoes. This is superb.
I'm not surprised at all that you've gone 5. I think it's just it's a really good opening comic, isn't it? And it's one of those ones that sets it up so nicely for the universe that it's creating. And it's something that, you know, it's what you want in a comic. When you read it, you want the next one, like immediately. You want that kind of, you want to binge it all. I know a lot of people probably wait for the trade. A lot of people do. That's how they read comics. But I just think in this case, if you want this to be a success, you need to be out there getting this comic, add it to your pull list, because it is an absolute beauty. And and obviously big shout out and thank you to IDW, to Paula Law, to Chris Evanhouse, to Brittany Peer for putting it together, for allowing us to see it, giving us an advance copy. I'm going 5 stars with this one, 5 potatoes with this one as well. It's brilliant. And again, and Brian, thanks for jumping on and chatting about it for a little while.
My pleasure. And again, can't recommend this enough. Thank you so much to obviously Paula Law for giving us the chance to get some eyes on this ahead of everybody else. It's a superb read. Thank you.
Go out and get it, guys, on September the 18th. Add it to your pull list, order it, whatever you need to do, but you need to get on it ASAP, because this is an awesome comic. That's it for this special installment of the Full Force Comics Burst. Thank you to my awesome co-host Brian Hickey, and to Paula Law, Chris Evanhouse, Brittany Peer, and the good folks at IDW Publishing for giving us the opportunity to review this issue before its release. See you next time, and as always, for Cobra. Make sure you get involved with the discussion by liking, sharing and commenting on these videos, and as always you can keep up with the show after listening by following on Twitter @The Full Force, liking the Facebook page facebook.com/The Full Force, and if you would like to contact the show you can message us on either of those platforms with feedback or questions. We have also started a Patreon page, so if you want to see your name up in lights on these videos or enjoy exclusive bonus content, then check out patreon.com/The Full Force Podcast, or click the link on any of the posts this podcast appears in. Full Force. And a big shout out to our sponsors, Distant Planet Comics and Collectibles, located at 601 Business Loop 70 West Suite 263, located in the Parkade Center, Columbia, Missouri. You can visit their website at distantplanetcomics.com and on Facebook at facebook.com/distantplanetcomics.